Hi, this is Sue for Parkinson Me, My Journey with Parkinson's. I was reading a Facebook page that I look at quite frequently by people with Parkinson's, and it has people on there that have Parkinson's, and it also has people on there who are caring for people with Parkinson's or closely associated with them, not necessarily in a caring role as such as yet, but it's every spectrum of this condition from early stages to latter stages. People write into this Facebook page, and it's quite interesting, and it gives you a lot of information about the sorts of things that happen to people on this journey with Parkinson's. And we're all different, and that's important to remember. We're all different. We're not all going to have the same path. We're not all going to have the same symptoms or to the same degree. So that's important to remember. So what happens to somebody you might have known with Parkinson's, like my mum and my dad, who were both quite different in their presentation, by the way, but something that happens to one of them didn't happen to the other. They were very, very different in the way they presented. So yeah, that's an important thing to talk about. Now, why I've called this Tough Times and Tough Decisions, I'll just lead in with a little bit of my personal stuff. I was diagnosed in 2020, on the 15th of December 2020. And I was a social worker. I only sort of retired for medical reasons because of my Parkinson's. It would be 2 years ago in May this year. And I was a social worker in the hospital, and a social worker that had been working for 11 years in the hospital and a total of 20 years all up, give or take a year. And so a lot of what I think, what I feel, what I experience is informed not just by my personal involvement with my mum and dad, but also because of my social work career. And so I've seen all sorts of people with all sorts of conditions and how people manage and work together or don't work together when somebody has a significant condition like Parkinson's. So that's what kind of informs my kind of opinions, and they are only my opinions. The things that I say in my blog and on my podcast are what I feel and what I think. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to think my way. It doesn't mean anything of the sort. It's just how I feel and think. And I'm always looking at how other people manage things, and I'm really open to people making comments. It's good to get other people's perspectives. So if at any time you feel like putting a comment on either my blog or my podcast, you're most welcome to do that. So yeah, tough times and tough decisions. So very early on in the piece, because I am a planner, I really like to know where my life is going as much as possible. And so I think ahead, plan ahead, and I like to feel organised, and I've got things sort of together in my head. So really, really early on in the piece, I had a chat to my husband. And it was one of those moments where you sort of have something to say, but that your partner, or in this case my husband, is not going to particularly enjoy the conversation. In fact, might be quite resistant. And my husband was very resistant to this conversation. So what was the conversation? Well, it was about safety, and it was about going into residential care if the need arose. And I sat there and I said to him, I need to talk about if I need to go into a residential care situation. And he said, no. It's far too early to be talking about that. And I said, I want to have this conversation with you while I'm still of sound mind, because when it's necessary for it to happen, or if it's necessary for it to happen, I will probably not be in the right frame of mind to actually agree or not, because the decision needs to be made to keep us both safe. So I said to him, I know that you will do your best to keep me at home for as long as possible, but the thing that I want you to hear is that if at any stage you feel unsafe, I feel unsafe, we're unsafe together, it's okay to look at me going into some kind of residential situation so that we can both protect our marriage. We may not be living together as such at that stage, but we will still be husband and wife, and we can spend some nice time together and enjoy being together when being at home becomes too tough and too hard for him to do on his own. So we had that conversation again, like I say, he wasn't that keen on it, but it was important to me that I said what I said, so that down the track, if it does happen, and it may never happen, but if it does happen, that he knows it's okay, that I've said it's okay, because I don't want him to be unsafe. I don't want me to be unsafe. I don't want something to happen to me and he feels terrible because he feels that he should have protected me, or whatever happens, it's not going to be his fault. But I really wanted to say that it was okay if and when it needed to happen. So the reason I'm talking about this now is I looked at this Facebook page, like I said, and the person was saying about some behaviours of their husband who has Parkinson's, and they've been together 40 plus years, and his character sounds like it's changed markedly in the last 6 months. And he's become suspicious, he has hallucinations, he thinks people are coming into the house, that his wife has not been faithful, lots of things like that. And yeah, it's really hard. You could almost see the pain in those words that she'd written on this Facebook post. And so I commented, because she said that should she go to her GP, should she do this, should she do that? And some people were saying, no, I wouldn't waste my time going to the GP, and it might be the drugs doing this to him, and all sorts of opinions. And everybody is entitled to their opinion. Absolutely, they're entitled to their opinion. But like I said before, I'm not a medical professional as such, but I did work in a hospital for 11 years, and from associating with doctors and nurses, etc., and working with patients, sometimes we got people in that were doing just like this gentleman, that was having aggression, that was confused, that was all sorts of things were going on for that person, very similar to this lady whose husband had shown some uncharacteristic anger and suspicion, etc. And she was obviously really upset and worried and didn't know where to turn. So what I said to her is, when you work in a hospital, like I said, you get to know how doctors think, at least a little bit. I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but one of the first things that doctors would always do when a patient sort of suddenly changed, like sometimes almost overnight, they start being confused and lashing out, and they might start swearing, and that's not like them. They have these sort of behaviours that think, gosh, what's going on here? Especially if it was sudden, the doctors would look for things like a urinary tract infection, a UTI. That doesn't sound like it would be a major, but as somebody who's had several UTIs in the past, I don't think I was affected in any way past the usual symptoms of a UTI. But if somebody has got compromised health, they're elderly, they're frail, a UTI is often the first thing that they look at, because, and I know a lot of people wouldn't be aware of this, a UTI can do all the things that I've just described. They can make a person confused, they can make them aggressive, they can change their behaviours quite markedly, and it's quite common. The other thing that people can have when they've been really sick is delirium, and that can be from an infection, that they suddenly start sort of acting quite strangely, and it could be that they've got delirium from something. So yeah, my suggestion to the lady on this Facebook page was to talk to her GP and to see whether there are some tests that could be run to see what might be going on with her husband. I mean, if it's a urinary infection, it might be easily fixed. If it's something else, there might be something that they can do to help. But in the interim, the other thing I said, just like I said to my husband about us both being safe, is if he's acting uncharacteristically and suspicious of her and getting angry at her, I really suggested that she should look at a safety plan. So look at a safety plan. And one of the people that I worked with in the community when I was working as a social worker was the lady whose husband was behaving in this way. It was quite concerning, and she felt really unsafe. And so she'd done some really good work. She had a next door neighbour that was also a good friend, and she told her about how she was starting to feel unsafe with her husband. And she gave her a key to her house. So the next door neighbour gave her a key to the house, and they said, if you need to get out of the house, if you're feeling unsafe there with him, come to my house. You don't have to ring or anything, just whatever the time, day or night, just use your key, let yourself in and be safe. While of course leaving him at home and making sure that doors were locked so that he couldn't get out and be at further risk himself. And from there, maybe ring an ambulance to get somebody to come and look at him if he was really being concerning, because he may need some help, he may need some medication. And to keep both of them safe is really important. And the thing too is that they've been married for several years, 40 plus years, and it must be a reasonable sort of a marriage. It's not a very good marriage to last that long. And I'm sure if they'd had a good, close, caring relationship for that long, that he would be mortified if he knew that he was making these accusations, if he knew that he was getting angry at him. I'm sure he would be mortified. So just making sure that she is safe, that he is safe, is really, really important. So yeah, somewhere along the line, those of us with Parkinson's, we will change. Things will get to a point where we need more help than one person can provide. We might need more help than even some carers coming in might not be enough. And so that tough decision may have to be made sometime in the future for those of us with Parkinson's to have to go into residential care. But it's not an easy decision. But for me, if I'm going to become unsafe and I put my husband at risk as well, then that might be the time when things need to change. And it will be sad and it will be tough. But it might just be the thing that we both need to happen before our relationship deteriorates because things are too hard. To protect that relationship, sometimes, even though you dearly want to stay living together, to protect that relationship, that most of your marriage had been good and supportive, to protect that way of being with each other so that you remain on good terms with a good marriage, it might be that we need to go into residential care. We need somebody else to do the caring, and they can pick us up and take us for an ice cream or a walk on the beach or something nice, but somebody else is doing the hard yards and caring for us. And that may not come for many, many years, but for me, I just needed to give him permission to know that if it needed to happen, it could happen. So yeah, a bit of a tough topic, but something to think on. So this has been Sue for Parkies and me, my journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be brave, be strong, be you.